Hi everyone, my name is Ashley. I hope everyone is having a wonderful semester so far. I will be discussing Paul Northcott's Just the Facts on Organized Crime. This article is found on the Royal Canadian Mounted Police website and describes a bunch of unknown facts about organized crime in Canada. To begin, I thought I would start off with the definition of organized crime as stated in the Canadian Criminal Code. This definition describes organized crime as being a group, however organized, that is composed of 3 or more people in or outside Canada and has, as one of its main purposes or main activities, the facilitation or commission of one or more serious offenses that, if committed, would likely result in the direct or indirect receipt of a material benefit, including a financial benefit, by the group or by any one of the persons who constitute the group. This is sort of a mouthful, so simply, the Canadian Criminal Code explains an organized crime group as being 3 or more people who, in some form or another, commit serious offenses in order to receive some sort of material gain for said group. So, who's involved in organized crime in Canada? In the article, there are 3 types of organized crime groups that Canada as a whole seems to focus on. These are outlaw motorcycle gangs, street gangs, and internationally connected crime groups. For example, this would be the mafia. As of present, there are more than 2,000 organized crime groups operating in Canada, and these are only the ones that have been detected. It should also be expressed that there are thought to be many members of these organized crime groups involved in our country's public sector, meaning the aspects of our country that are controlled by the government. This could mean that those involved could be in law enforcement, government agencies, education, military, and more. With that being said, who do you think gets affected by organized crime groups indirectly? That's right, Canadians. If there are these groups involved in our public sector, each and every individual may see the detriments that their criminal activities may produce. Next, I am going to describe what is exactly involved in organized crime in Canada. Often, these groups are involved in many different illegal activities, including drug and human trafficking, financial crimes, fraud, theft, contraband, and counterfeit goods. Organized crime groups may also use private sector businesses in order to launder their proceeds of crime, aka money laundering. This is when they hide the actual origins of their finances, which are acquired through the use of illegal activities, of course, by moving these funds through financial transactions that are seemingly more legitimate. An example of this would be the use of shell companies, which are companies that are no longer active, that basically only exist on paper, so that organized crime groups can filter the money through them to make their financial statements look more legitimate. The article explains that 29% of organized crime groups are involved in some sort of money laundering. This is a huge percentage and causes a drastic loss of actual Canadian revenue. To dive into this a little bit more, I have decided to talk about the facts regarding each type of organized crime group separately. For starters, I will be talking about outlaw motorcycle gangs. As Northcott says, in Canada, these gangs extend from coast to coast. Just doing a quick Google search, I found about 30 motorcycle groups in Canada over the last 40 years. Sure, some have been absorbed by larger groups, but that simply means that they are still existing under a more well-known name. These groups take part in many different crimes, such as fraud, counterfeiting, money laundering, extortion, corruption, and even more violent crimes like drug trafficking, illegal firearms dealing, intimidation, assault, and murder. They also use support clubs as a part of their networking and recruitment plans. They surround themselves with other motorcycle groups and gangs in order to gain their support. However, they may also find rivals in doing this as well. I mean, there is a reason that this sophisticated organized crime group is so well known across our country and across the world and displayed in so many movies and television. The second type of organized crime group is street gangs. This is the group that you and I are more likely to hear about on a given day in our city. They take part in criminal activities such as assault, homicide, use of illegal firearms, theft, and drug sales. As mentioned in the article, street gangs are more likely to be involved in overtly violent crimes and therefore create a higher risk to public safety. For example, late last year, there was an article released by the Edmonton Journal that explained nearly half of the homicides that took place in Edmonton over the previous year were from gang activity alone. In addition, a good portion of these murders were related to the gang's drug trade networks. This is a clear and present issue for Edmonton and for Canada as a whole. These gangs can also be seen as taking part in other types of organized crime groups, like the outlaw motorcycle groups mentioned earlier, the mafia, which will be discussed next. Since street gangs have a higher presence, other groups use them as a way to exert their violent and criminal activities so that they're not caught themselves. Ultimately, street gangs are what we, as Canadians, see as being the face of organized crime groups. Lastly, the mafia does also play a large role in the organized crime network of Canada, even if we do not hear about it nearly as much. The article revealed that in 2020, there was about 25 mafia groups in Canada, surprisingly, that were linked to 11% of the assessed organized crime groups mentioned earlier. Once again, these are just the known groups in Canada. Northcott explains that the mafia managed drug importation networks in addition to committing criminal acts. However, their members are rarely involved in public displays of violence. In fact, high-level members are almost always insulated from acts of violence, using street gang members to commit acts of intimidation, extortion, arson, and murder. Therefore, who knows if there's a prominent mafia group in Canada? Perhaps they are just doing so well at hiding their crimes by using smaller street gangs that they have left no trace. Now, let's talk about the big problem here. Obviously, everyone knows that organized crime as a whole is an issue worth talking about, but exactly how is it a big problem in Canada? What kinds of aspects do you think are the biggest threat to Canadian society in regards to organized crime? If you're thinking violence and drug involvement, you would be right. The article states that as of the year 2020, a whopping 73% of these organized crime groups take part in violent activities. I just did a little math. It would mean that out of the 2,000 known organized crime groups in Canada, 1,460 of them commit violent crimes. These violent activities could be assaults, extortion, shootings, homicides, human trafficking, you name it. In addition to the violence, the drug trafficking issue is right up there with the list of the biggest threats to Canada's society. Northcott explains that the drug methamphetamine is one of the most significant national level criminal market threats. The methamphetamine market continues to grow, with 164 organized crime groups being active in this drugs trade market. Next to this would be the cocaine trading market, as the article explains it to be one of the most profitable and stable illicit drug markets in Canada. This is quite clear because every time Canadian news and media outlets mention a drug bust, the drug is most often found to be cocaine. The RCMP say that there is at least 313 organized crime groups that are involved in some kind of cocaine trafficking. 313. And once again, these are just the groups known by the RCMP. Violence and drug trafficking is a continuous and growing issue in Canada, and it threatens the safety of every person in Canada that could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, what is Canada doing to fix this? As I mentioned at the beginning, the Canadian Criminal Code recognizes organized crime groups as being a detriment to society, and they use their own definition to create a more detailed account of what law enforcement needs to be looking for. In addition, Canada has the Firearms Act. This means that there is more gun control in Canada with the implementation of stricter gun registration laws and necessary training needed in order to even be able to own a firearm legally. We also have the Safe Streets and Communities Act, which increases the support for victims of crime, increases the protection of the public, and increases penalties for specifically organized crime. This is a necessary deterrent, even if it may not always work. Lastly, Canada has implemented the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act. This act was made in order to deter and further detect money laundering and terrorist financing. Ultimately, this is necessary in order to protect Canada's legitimate financial system and therefore protect the revenue of our country. These acts are important in order to decrease the amount of organized crime in Canada. However, it is clear that these are not always a foolproof deterrent. Now, I thought I would mention a little example of an organized crime group in Canada that everyone may have heard of, and that would be the Hells Angels. This is a group that prides themselves in being motorcycle enthusiasts, specifically choosing the Harley-Davidson as their bikes of choice. They're pretty much known worldwide and are considered to be the most influential and powerful outlaw motorcycle group in Canada. As mentioned earlier, like most outlaw motorcycle groups, they are assisted by street gangs or smaller motorcycle gangs to carry out some of their crimes. They are also the basis for what the media portrays outlaw motorcycle gangs to be. They are mentioned in many movies and television shows, and they've created a world-renowned name for themselves. The Hells Angels are not only dangerous because of the criminal acts that they commit, but the influence that they have on the world due to the media. On the surface, this outlaw motorcycle gang is a typical organized crime group. They take part in many different kinds of illegal activities, particularly violent crimes. These would include drug dealing, drug trafficking, illegal arms dealing, extortion, prostitution, assaults, homicides, and much more. Obviously, with this happening, one can clearly see that organized crime groups such as the Hells Angels are dangerous to society. However, this group in particular takes part in charity work and other public events in order for them to be portrayed in a more positive light. They volunteer with many known charities like Habitat for Humanity and the Humane Society, and often these events are posted on social media or news outlets, and therefore they do not get a bad reputation, or a lesser of a bad reputation, regardless of the crimes that they commit behind the scenes. Now, don't get me wrong, the work that they do with the many different charities is absolutely important. However, it should not camouflage the crimes that the Hells Angels are associated with. I find it's almost as if the media masks the illicit activities committed in order to create a facade of positivity among these groups. Ultimately, organized crime is a prominent issue in Canada. Although we as Canadians do not often see the crimes that they commit, let alone experience them firsthand, this does not mean they don't exist. Individuals will still be affected by the illicit activities that take place in organized crime groups. For one thing, the taxes that each Canadian pays can increase because of losses in Canadian revenue. Crimes like money laundering, as mentioned earlier, can directly impact our tax system. In addition to this, our insurance policies may increase because of car and property theft. I've actually heard about this happening personally, as my close family member works in insurance and has mentioned that if there is an increase of theft, there would be an inevitable increase in costs of insurance policies. Overall, organized crime groups have and will continue to be a large issue in Canada that affects each and every individual. And now I just have a couple of quick discussion questions for you guys, and it would be really greatly appreciated if you would let me know your thoughts and your answers. First, how do you feel organized crime impacts individuals in Canada? Do you feel like it affects you personally? And second, do you believe that organized crime has become an increasing issue in Canada? Please let me know what you guys think, and I would like to thank you guys for watching my presentation, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. And here's just a quick list of my references. Thanks again for watching. I wish you all luck with your presentations and with the remainder of your semester. Thanks again, guys.